Well, good afternoon. Steve and I work in a Centre for Innovation and Research in Education at Eton. And part of our role is to see change coming. I have to confess that when ChatGPT launched 3.5, we didn't see it coming, and we were taken as by surprise as other schools were. And like all schools, we're now struggling with, working with, and addressing the question of how we make good use of AI in a way that is in line with how students actually learn, the habits, the psychology, and the neuroscience of learning. And the topic we're going to look at today in particular is use of AI to support memory and challenge and growth in the classroom. Part of my role is to talk with educators all around the world and to see who is at the forefront of thinking about this. And I can honestly say that we are all more or less in the same position. As one of them put it to me, trying to run a school and get to grips with this topic of AI while also delivering a curriculum, it's rather like refueling while you're actually in flight. We know it has to be done, it can't be avoided, but it does feel like doing several things at once. A few more quotations from talking to leading educators around the world. Schools are just not ready to meet this challenge. We need to meet it, we know it's an imperative, but we don't feel ready for it. I think we've all encountered this one, that there's widespread fear and lack of knowledge around AI. Too much noise and not enough signal. What are the aspects of AI we really need to be looking at? What are the risks we really need to pay attention to? What's coming is not utopia, but it's not dystopia either. However, it's coming so fast we cannot afford to ignore it. And this one, which I particularly like, and this is the line I'm taking with my colleagues, many of whom are resistant and skeptical, which is it's fine to be skeptical. In fact, it's probably right to be skeptical about some aspects of AI, but we can embrace it at the same time, and indeed we must. In talking to our own college, we have been really taking this line. What does it actually mean for us in our school? And these questions would apply to any school. What can we do right away with the knowledge that we have? What seems to be coming down the line? And what for us is AI possibly the solution to? Taking that as our kind of guiding principle. Skepticism is fine, but we need to embrace it. So I want to introduce one paper which may well be familiar to you because it's going to address a number of issues around AI and memory, which Steve will now, after me, give Eton's approach to by way of solution. This particular paper, The Memory Paradox, points to the fact that AI's great benefit is that it allows us to offload cognitive struggle. AI's big problem is that it allows us to offload cognitive struggle. And really the question is, what kind of cognitive offloading is beneficial and leads to freeing up cognition for other things? What kind of cognitive loading actually is acting against the struggle needed for deep learning? 4 ideas coming out of this particular paper. It notes that over recent years, there has actually been a drop in IQ scores for the first time in many decades. And the paper seeks to answer why this might be. They think it's partly to do with student-driven learning, discovery learning. They think that is one of the reasons for it. But the other reason for it seems to be use of digital tools, and in particular AI, of an inappropriate kind. Because it can reduce the internal cognitive effort, which is the very effort needed for deep learning. Secondly, this seems to have led, along with discovery learning, to scores plateauing and indeed dropping in cognitive countries in IQ, which is obviously an alarming trend. 2 more principles. Individuals with strong internalized knowledge, strong schemata in their memory, are better able to evaluate and guide AI outputs. If we rely too much on AI, we become less discriminating in what AI puts out. And this, of course, is doubly dangerous, partly because we know that AI can be very unreliable. AI can also be trained according to algorithms we may not like. But then we become unable to discern which is an output that is trustworthy or not trustworthy. And the last principle from this paper, which I think is worth looking at, is that while technology can augment learning, if we offload too much of the cognitive effort, that risks offloading the very systems we should be training for expertise. In other words, while it can aid learning, it can run directly counter to learning. So these are a number of the sorts of issues which, in terms of our pedagogical practice at Eton, we've been looking at and asking ourselves, what is the answer to these issues? I'm going to hand over now to Steve, who will talk a little around that.
So we've been thinking about how to get students to use AI in beneficial ways. And one of the first strategies that we adopted was to kind of have this core message that you should turn it round, and instead of asking the AI questions, you should get the AI to ask you the questions. So effectively turning the AI into a personal tutor. And anyone who was around for my session earlier today will have seen the chatbot and the tool that we've developed to build on that idea. But it's all around the principle that if the AI is getting you to do thinking by asking you questions, then that's going to be beneficial to your education. This slide I must have presented 100 times before, and it has the classic example of, rather than just saying, explain radioactive decay to me, you put a little bit more effort into the prompt and get it to ask you questions one at a time. And if they get something wrong, then ask follow-up questions that invite you to correct your mistakes. The simple prompt would just give you a lot of information that involves quite a lot of maturity and kind of understanding of learning to be able to absorb that and not just surface read it and superficially think you have understanding. Whereas if you've done the more interactive prompt, then it's going to test your understanding, test your knowledge, and adapt to what you already know, what you're getting right and what you're getting wrong. I thought it would also be helpful to share a little bit of data about Eton and what we've discovered about the boys' use of AI already. So this particular set of information comes from our Wi-Fi access logs, so the actual usage with their devices, not from a survey, so we know this to be robust information. And 94% of the boys are using ChatGPT, which is not a small statistic. It's up there with the most used tools. Good old Wikipedia, which many people would have thought of as the website to find out information of a few years past, is now way down at 73% compared to ChatGPT up in the 90s. Some other information based on surveys that we've done for the students, so finding out about what they're willing to volunteer about their usage, shows that certainly there's more usage in private study time. So when they're working independently back in their rooms or between lessons, there is still notable use within the schoolroom. But if you look at the use overall, over half of the boys, according to the survey, are daily users of AI. So that's clearly quite significant. We want to steer them to use it in a beneficial way. So here's the bit where I'm not going to take credit for it, but I'm really pleased to see that we've got some progress in the statistics about how much they are turning it round into a personal tuition-like conversation. Three-quarters of the boys, very nearly three-quarters of the boys, said that at some point they were getting the AI to ask them questions like a personal tutor. We've still got asking the AI question, including generating text, generating lists of information or grammar lists or whatever, as the number one use. But in second place, getting the AI to ask the students questions is there. Really pleased about that. It's significantly higher than kind of other multimodal interactions like generating images or voice interaction. So they are, certainly according to the survey results, using it in that capacity as a personal tutor. A really important question that I wanted to ask them was, have they decided not to use AI at any point in time? Either because it was taking away the intellectual challenge or they thought it was doing the work for you. We've got 52% of the boys with the correct answer that yes, they chose not to use AI at a certain point in time. The 36% of boys here who are confident they're using it in appropriate and beneficial ways, maybe they are. Maybe they need a bit more refinement on the decision there. The 4% is quite worrying. I'm not worried about AI doing the work for me and use it anyway. What we really need to do is expand this 52% up to 100%, so that all of the boys at certain points in time are deciding, no, I won't use AI now because it's going to, as I say, take away the intellectual challenge or do the work for you. We want to steer them to use it in ways that are beneficial. Hello. There's one little glimmer of hope, which is that when we approached exam season, the amount of boys using AI in the lead up to exams did seem to drop off in year 11 and year 13. So that's our, obviously, boys approaching the GCSE exams or approaching their A-level exams. So at that point, maybe they thought, I can't rely on AI when I'm going into exams, so I shouldn't really be using it right in the preparation leading up to it. The usage still for the non-exam years was still up in the 70% of daily users. But that is an interesting statistic there. And in terms of trends, I did a survey 18 months or so ago, and we've definitely got an increase in the number of boys using it and the number of boys using it more frequently. So a significant increase, 43% increase from the ones who are using it daily. That, of course, is the statistic I'm really pleased to highlight. We've gone from 55% to 75%. So from half to nearly 3/4 of the boys saying that at some point they were using AI to ask them questions. So that was good news. So the most recent thing that I've developed and is available for free, if anybody would like to make use of it through that link up there, is this series of one-page guides for writing first-person prompts that you can then give to the students to use AI in beneficial ways. And what I'd like to spend some time sharing with you is the rationale behind each of these different rainbow-coloured pages and the neuroscience and pedagogical backing behind the advice in each of these. And again, if you were here earlier on, I was talking about the chatbot that we're developing that takes a lot of these ideas and produces off-the-shelf recipes, but it's also valuable to be able to come up with these ideas for activities yourselves. And actually, if a teacher's got some recognition of beneficial ways AIs can be used, can model that to students, particularly if the students haven't got to the age of 13 yet and can't use AIs independently, you can still think of ways of modeling AI use in beneficial ways and really highlighting the ways that are going to take away the valuable cognition. So let's go through it. First one is all about cognitive offloading. And I've used these two words to describe basically any form of AI use. In some assemblies and insets that I've done, I've invited everybody to think of the two words that they would use to describe AI use, and you get a range of different things, all the way to a blatant plagiarism on one end of the spectrum, up to extremely helpful at the other end of the spectrum. But in reality, I think cognitive offloading is the best term to describe what AI use is. Some uses of AI are clearly taking away the thinking, getting the AI to do the thinking for you, which is not good for you developing those thought processes yourself. But if you can work out what are some cognitive offloading targets to shift over to the AI so that you can focus on the main objective of a task, then it can be beneficial. So that's this idea of thoughtful AI use can enhance beneficial cognition. So on the first page, I talk about some prompt engineering techniques, which many people are already familiar with, but I'm focusing particularly on the first person way of writing it. So not telling the AI what it's supposed to be. And actually, there's some interesting research showing that if you tell the AI you are an expert in such a thing, it's actually less beneficial than stating what you are, the person using the AI. So that's my focus on this, writing the prompts. So you say, I am a student, I want to be able to do this. I want you to do this for me. I don't want you to do this for me. That steers the prompts quite well. And also in that section, it talks about thinking, what is the objective for a task? What are the key forms of cognition that you are trying to get students to get better at? And what are the forms of cognition that it's actually going to be potentially valuable to offload to the AI so that the objective, the cognitive offloading target, can be the focus? So then we've got the idea of retrieval practice. So this goes back to the neuroscience-backed concept that actually to really strengthen long-term memories and to make sure that you're able to get this foundation of knowledge, it's not what goes into your mind, it's what you draw out of your mind, it's what you retrieve. And this idea that knowledge is the foundation of higher order thinking. So we have a limited working memory, a limited cognitive capacity. And if you are using all of that cognitive capacity with the foundational facts that you need to solve a problem, so you're presented with a problem, you immediately look up several facts. Maybe a simple example would be something like trying to solve a mathematical equation and you immediately look up the result of some simple multiplication because you don't know your times tables. You've used up all your cognitive capacity just getting those facts into your short-term memory and don't have anything left for solving the higher order nature of the problem. Whereas if you've got stuff well established in long-term memory, effectively you got it for free. You can retrieve that with minimal effort, saving your working memory for the new ideas to solve a more complex problem. And of course, every time you retrieve a fact from memory or a concept or anything that you've got previously memorized, then you're strengthening those neural pathways and making it so that subsequent retrievals are easier. And again, getting effectively that knowledge for free when you want to solve a problem. There's several different options for prompts that focus on retrieval practice. Things as simple as multiple choice quizzes, but also just getting kind of a Socratic discussion where the AI is constantly asking questions for the student to come up with ideas at deeper and deeper levels of kind of detail. The next page is around activity scaffolding. And as teachers, we would naturally show a worked example of a solution, and then invite the students to solve a small part of it independently, and then gradually build up until we get to a situation where the students are able to solve the whole problem by themselves and they're well practiced in that skill. Well, you can get an AI to do a very similar thing. In fact, it's quite straightforward. If you just say to an AI that you want it to first give a worked example, then ask me, because again, first person, ask me to solve one part of it, then a bit more, and then gradually build up until I'm able to do it independently. It works quite well. I've got some examples in the Rainbow pages with simultaneous equations in maths, where it presents a full work solution, then gradually builds up independence. And a lot of teachers kind of are quite surprised that this works so well, and you don't just use AI to come up with the finished solution, you can use it to build up gradually to being able to do something. You can also chunk activities into what I call different cognitive offloading targets. So I'm a scientist myself, so definitely not an essay writing expert, but I can imagine a situation where the first stage of writing an essay is coming up with my initial ideas, kind of the ideation phase. Then I'm trying to structure my argument. Then I'm trying to refine my language and weave it all together so that I've got both sides well presented, come up with a conclusion. Each stage of that process, you can think of what's the key piece of cognition that you want to achieve, and maybe have a different prompt for each of those stages of the task. So I'm a student who is doing the initial ideation phase for writing an essay, and think about what the key forms of cognition are, get the AI to help. Then have a completely different activity for the next phase when you're trying to pull your arguments together. In science, I can think of perhaps more convincing arguments for this, but certainly breaking down a task into multiple activities with different cognitive offloading targets is what I recommend in these pages. And here's the kind of bit which is a dream, because of course, for the majority of our courses, we're still building up to a paper-based assessment, a paper-based exam, but it would be wonderful if we could shift the assessment process to creation, the journey to the end product. And I'm very careful who I say this to with my colleagues at Eton, but perhaps the essay is not really the most valuable part, but the journey to creating that essay and all the stages that you are going through to build up your argument, develop your knowledge, and construct all of the key ideas is more important than what comes at the end. Then the idea of prediction errors. So a lot of kind of simple use of AI focuses only on the right answers, and even multiple choice questions can be far too focused on finding what the right answer is. And actually, from the neuroscience, we know that a key driver of learning is when we see things that are not what we predict. Our brains are constantly running kind of a simulation of the world. And if you see something that differs from what your brain predicts, that has a neurochemical reaction that triggers the learning process to go into overdrive. And there's a funny little example I like to give. Imagine you see a squirrel running across the top of a fence and it's approaching a tree trunk. Your brain is running a simulation and thinks, that squirrel's probably going to jump onto the tree trunk and run up to the top. Or maybe it might jump down and start searching for some food. If the squirrel suddenly shot up into the sky and had a little Superman cape dangling out behind its tail, that's not what you predict. And your brain would go into kind of overdrive mode of, my mental model is wrong. I need to change my mental model of the world to match my observation. There's actually a lot of really interesting parallels between how machine learning algorithms work and how biological learning processes work. And it's all about when you see something that differs from what you predict, that's when learning really reaches its kind of maximum rate. So if we can design activities purposefully for cognitive conflict, so that they're presenting things that are wrong, maybe write an essay with some mistakes, and the purpose of the task is for the student to look through that essay, find out what the problems are, or give several different statements of varying level of validity, and the purpose of the activity is for the student to find which ones are wrong and why. That's actually much more valuable than just focusing on an AI asking you what the correct answer is to things. And related to this, it's actually fighting against the AI's nature to do things that are wrong. So what we want to do is we need to be really explicit in instruction to the AI to avoid it just trying to say, please the user and always come up with things that are aligned. Learning is hard work, and the AI needs to be really convinced to do something that the user of the AI is going to find hard. So the last page is all about the idea of desirable difficulties, and we know that naive use of AI makes a false sense of competence, an illusion of knowledge. So even pre-AI, when we had Google searches or just sat navs, we get a confidence that we know how to get the answers to things. We think we know everything because we can easily find the answers to things, but actually that's not the same as really having a competence and a deep understanding. So we should purposefully design activities and purposefully write prompts so that the AIs are challenging and provoking the students into doing things that are difficult. But actually this breaks out into multiple different levels for students with additional needs. So we can think about making tasks that are purposely difficult in one area, but not unnecessarily difficult in aspects that the student finds hard for other reasons. So a simple example is saying to the AI explicitly, I am dyslexic, and therefore can you help me with this aspect of it? Because the task might be that we're trying to focus on knowledge retrieval and deepening understanding, and this particular task is not around some of the things that the student might find more difficult. And of course, if you think about it, if a task is too easy, we're not going to learn anything. If a task is too hard, we're going to get frustrated and we're not going to learn anything. So whether it's aligning the difficulty level to just reach that sweet spot of deep thinking, or aligning the difficulty level so that the thinking is targeted at the cognitive target rather than the things that different students find difficult for different reasons, we can come up with a better activity. And I also briefly talk about this metacognitive approach that all of this hard work of designing these AI activities is kind of thrown away if you don't think about, after you've thought hard for a while, you need time to rest and let the brain go into diffuse mode and think about those ideas subconsciously. If you immediately, heaven forbid, jump on TikTok or do some doom scrolling, actually a lot of the post-activity subconscious processing that's going on is immediately knocked out, and the studies have shown that spending a bit of time just reflecting on things calmly afterwards and not immediately jumping to another task is extremely vital, as is sleep, for strengthening those memories and building all of these skills. So like I said, those pages are freely available following that link there, and there's other resources on our CIRL website, CIRL.etoncollege.com. Feel free to chop them apart, rebrand them, do anything you like with them, and as long as they are benefiting students to use AI in a way that's beneficial, then really their purpose has been solved there. I've got a few bits of extra reading to recommend. The paper Jonnie already mentioned on memory paradox, a really interesting and provocative paper about the zone of no development, this idea around effectively many forms of AI use having a really detrimental effect on the learning process, which kind of is the, if I needed an argument for why the things I've been discussing in those Rainbow pages is relevant, that's a really good paper for it. And a couple of other good books, particularly this one, which links neuroscience to pedagogy and is kind of the basis behind a lot of the things I was talking about in those ones. So yes, hopefully that's all right for time. Thank you very much for listening.